Hello, my name is Adrienne Plumley. I'm a Mi'kmaq, Métis, Scottish, and Welsh educator from Takaranto, Toronto, Ontario. In my current position, I'm in my third year as an instructional leader for Indigenous education with the Urban Indigenous Education Centre at the Toronto District School Board. Prior to moving into that role, I was a kindergarten teacher at Kapapa Wandering Spirit School. As an educator and as an Indigenous educator, I have a deep love for Indigenous picture books, so I was very excited to be asked to be part of today's events. I'll begin by speaking a little bit about the collection, and then at the end I'll be answering some educator questions. From Sea to Sea to Sea, Celebrating Indigenous Picture Books celebrates 25 of the best Indigenous picture books, including some of my personal favorites, published in what we now call Canada between 2018 and 2020. The books were chosen ensuring that the collection reflected the diversity of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit voices from sea to sea to sea. They have also ensured that the titles are available and in print for anyone who wishes to access them. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Linda Lou Claessens. Linda Lou is an Ojibwe librarian and CEO at Bageshwanong First Nation Public Library. She holds a Bachelor of Arts, a Bachelor of Education, and a Master's of Education. Linda Lou taught on her res Walpole First Nation and on First Nations in Manitoba and British Columbia. Early literacy, creative writing, and developing partnerships to reach more children with the message of literacy and stories are her strong interests.
Bonjour, Anishna. Linda Lou Claessens in Desnakas, Walpole Island First Nation, Ndunjaba. Hello, my name is Linda Lou Claessens. I'm from Walpole Island First Nation, also known as Keshwanon, place where the waters divide. I'm very pleased to be with you today to help present the Educator's Resource for From Sea to Sea to Sea, Celebrating Indigenous Picture Books. I manage the public library here on Walpole Island, and today I'm going to share a story with you. It's currently my favorite. It is called The Train. It's written by Jody Callahan. She's a Mi'kmaq from Lustiguk, Quebec, which is right on the border of New Brunswick. Later on, I will share some teaching tips with you, and I look forward to this time. The book is illustrated by Georgia Leslie, and so now it gives me great pleasure to read to you The Train. The Train. Ashley was smaller than her sister, but old enough to walk herself to school every morning and back again at the end of the day. She took her time when she walked, kicking dirt to uncover stones and pieces of colored glass, which she kept on the windowsill in her bedroom. Oh, the sun was exceptionally bright this afternoon. Ashley had to shield her eyes with a hand to see the road. A car sped past her, billowing up a cloud of dirt. It stung her eyes, and she stopped to wipe them. Squinting, she followed the tire tracks up the road to where the old train station used to stand. A small figure stood in the tall grass by the tracks, and Ashley recognized the way the figure leaned against his cane. She smiled and broke into a run, and the beads in her backpack jingled in their tin, and her school books bounced heavy against her back. "Uncle," she shouted, "Uncle!" Ashley's uncle turned and greeted her with a smile. "Hello, Toos," he said, extending his good arm to give her a hug. She rushed into him, burrowing her face into his wool jacket. He was warm against her cheek. She inhaled deeply. He smelled like sage. She pulled away and looked up at him. "Uncle, what are you doing here?" And the corners of his eyes crinkled, and one side of his mouth turned up in a lopsided smile as Ashley's uncle looked at her. She could see the light in his eyes, and he focused his gaze down the train tracks. The planks of wood between the metal rails were rotting and broken from years and years of weather damage. It was easy to see the community no longer thought of this place. "I'm waiting for the train," he let out in a small voice. Ashley looked down the track too. It was worn and overgrown with weeds, no longer fit for a train. She giggled. "Uncle, the train doesn't come here anymore." "I know, Toos." And he shifted his weight on his cane, and his smile slowly drooped. "I know." Ashley stopped smiling as well and furrowed her brow in concentration. "What's wrong, Uncle? Why are you so sad?" A look of indecision crossed his face as he glanced down at his small niece. "Come here," he said. Uncle hobbled over to a piece of concrete foundation left over from the old train station. He sat down and balanced his cane atop his knees. Ashley followed, sitting in the tall grass by his feet. She plucked a dandelion and rubbed it against the back of her hand, tracing a heart with the yellow stain. "I'm sad because our people have forgotten about this place," her uncle said, looking off down the track. Ashley almost turned to see what he was looking at, but she knew nothing was there. She had walked by this place 1,000 times. She focused on her uncle, studying the lines on his small face. And whiffs of gray hair fluttered around his head as the wind blew from behind him. Yet he looked young to her right now. "What happened?" she wondered aloud. "This place is very important to me and to people like me," he said proudly. "Why? What could be so important about a weeded over train track?" Uncle clutched his cane in both hands and he planted the rubber end firmly on the ground, and he leaned into it, looking at where she sat in the tall grass. "A long time ago, there was a train that ran through this place," he began. "It would come maybe once a month to drop things off, things like rice and potatoes, stuff from outside of this reserve." He took his handkerchief out of his pocket and placed it on his lap, picking at the loose threads as he spoke. "Giju, grandmother, would send me and your grandfather Timmy down to meet the train because we were the oldest. We would all line up here to wait with our baskets, and after we got our rations, we would walk home. Timmy and I, we'd always sneak a potato each to eat on the way home. We ate them raw like they were apples." Ashley giggled at the thought of grandfather Timmy and uncle as small boys eating raw potatoes. Her uncle continued. "One day, Giju sent the 4 oldest kids out with baskets. It was early fall, but she made us take our winter coats. She was crying, and we didn't know why. Giju didn't cry often. And when she got started, she couldn't stop. She gave us each a kiss and sent us to the train station." Uncle looked down at the foundation he was sitting on. "When we arrived, there were children from all over the village. I saw my cousin Benny, so I asked him what was going on. He didn't know." Uncle pointed to the broken track. The train was already here. A few men were standing by the open cargo doors. They pointed at us and said, "Okay, you first." And then they put us on the train. Ashley wanted to speak, but her uncle's expression stopped her. Uncle began again. My brother and sister were a bit younger than me, so they got put on a different car. Timmy and I were bigger, and they moved us to the front. When we got to the school, the nuns told us to get inside. They took our clothes. They took our baskets. They cut off all our hair. They told us we were no longer native. And if we put up a fuss, we were hit. Sometimes worse. Uncle's voice trailed off into a whisper. We weren't allowed to speak our native language. We weren't allowed to be Nunu. Ashley's uncle picked up his handkerchief and blew his nose. He clutched it tightly in his right hand, and his shoulders were trembling softly. I was there for 6 years, he told his niece. I didn't know how to speak any English, so I didn't talk to many people. I was like a little mouse hiding in my room. And he smiled softly, tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. I tried to be invisible, but they found me. They found me. Ashley stared down at the grass. She plucked a few pieces and tied them into knots. Why did they do that? Why did they do that? She looked up. The deep lines in her uncle's face had softened. His eyes glittered as the sun shone down on his brown face. Because we were different. Ashley's cheeks grew warmer. She felt angry and confused. Why didn't your mommy and daddy come and get you? Why didn't they stop the train? And she felt her own tears welling up. Her uncle shrugged. They didn't know. No one knew. But that train changed everything. Were you sad to leave? Ashley asked. Uncle nodded, and his voice began to tremble again. There was nobody beside us waving goodbye. There was nobody there to hug us and to kiss us, or to remember who we were when we left that day. I'm sorry, Uncle. Ashley choked through her tears. Uncle placed his good hand on her shoulder. It's not your fault, Toos. He lifted her chin and smiled at her. You and your sister make me so happy. When I hear you laugh and see you run and play, it makes me think that one day everything will be okay again. One day we won't be so sad. He paused and looked toward the track for a moment. I wanted you to know where your family has come from, Ashley, so you can be proud of where you are going. Ashley wiped her tears with her sleeve. Is that why you come to sit here, Uncle? To remember what happened? He nodded and thought for a moment. I come here to remember what happened, but I also come here to wait. What are you waiting for? Ashley asked, craning her neck to look at the tracks, broken and rusted, still in the evening light, just how she had left them. I'm waiting for what we lost that day to come back to us. Why? Because if I don't, who will? He asked, closing his eyes tightly. Ashley reached up and touched Uncle's fingers. They uncurled and her small hand rested inside his. He looked at his little niece. She smiled up at him and said, Don't worry, Uncle. I will wait with you. The end. That's the end of that beautiful story of the train. written by Jody Callahan. One thing I'd like to share with the audience out there is that both my parents attended residential school. My father at what they call the mush hole, and my mother was taken by boat when she was 13 years old up to Sault Ste. Marie to Shingbok. So the whole residential school experience is really, it resonates with me. I'm the daughter of residential school survivors. So I just wanted to say that this is very, very meaningful to me. So miigwech for hearing us and sharing this whole story, this whole event that we're promoting with your contacts, with your schools, with your library world. Miigwech. Now I'm going to share with you today some of the teaching ideas, the extensions that were taken from the 2021 edition of From Sea to Sea to Sea, an educator's resource featuring The Train. When I looked at the book The Train immediately, and as soon as I read it, all kinds of ideas just came to me about if I was reading this story to a class, what would I want them to do? What would I want them to see? What would I want them to take away from this book? Well, all you teachers, you librarians who are out there, you know all about books. You have a love of books, and you just want to share these interesting stories with kids. You want them to get something that just gets them so highly excited. So, straight from the educator's resource, I'm going to share with you some of the things that I would do. I would do a picture walk. I'm sure you all know you walk through the story and think about some interesting things there. One of the things about The Train is it has a few Mi'kmaq words in there. The glossary of Mi'kmaq words, Tus, short for Ntus, which means my daughter. And there's word for mother in Nunu, indigenous person. This book is about residential schools and some of the things that happened to the families and the hurts that went along with them. Now, before I go any farther, whenever I read a story, I like to share with my audience where the story happened. How can I relate to it? I would like to know those things. So today I have a little map here, and it's going to show you where this story came from. The Mi'kmaq people, and they're living right here in Quebec. This whole green part is Quebec, and over here this orangey peach part is New Brunswick. Well, this reserve, Listalook, where Jody Callahan lives, is right on the border there, right there across the border from Campbellton. So that, on that small reserve, is where Jody Callahan lives, where she grew up, and speaking with many people, she wrote this story here about the residential school experiences. So it's always good to know a little bit about things like that. So I talk a lot about relationships. This book is about the relationship between a great uncle and his niece, and how there's always lessons going on. The elder teaches the younger one. The younger one has her insights. So what I wanted to share with you today, how to extend this teaching, was to show you some of the things that I've done with this lesson. Once I've read the story, I have to say I am a big fan of retells, and the retells that I encourage the children to do, it could be anything as simple as, doing just the oral one, but I find it really sticks with the kids if they're able to do some sort of craft, something that'll just really extend the teaching for that particular book. So today I quickly threw some things together. I went in and looked to see what I had. I had some little forms like this. I thought, oh, I could make this into Ashley. This could be Uncle. And I looked around to see what else I could have. Okay, I said popsicle sticks. Well, if I had, I looked around, looks like those big tongue depressors. I had some of those. I had markers. I had plasticine, all different colors. I started doing some things and I thought, okay, how can I have these kids do this? Well, I found from my teaching career that kids, a lot of times they like to do group work. A lot of times they like to work on their own. So you could have your class divide into maybe groups of 2, have them work together, give them some materials they can work with. Again, I have many things that I have that I've used. For example, I found eyes. I have my glue, I have my scissors, I have my felt, I have all sorts of things that I can use. I looked through the recycle bin and I found foam that held a computer. And so there's all sorts of things. It's always great to recycle, as you know. So when I did this, I was thinking, okay, if I have students work in groups of 2, or if they want to work on their own, depending on their age, there's different things I can do. So remember the little figures I came up with? Well, and my popsicle sticks, my big popsicle sticks, well, I pulled around, I found I had some foam. I came up with Ashley, and I came up with Uncle, and I just put them together and I started thinking, okay, I know kids love to play with puppets and they love to use drama, and those are the kinds of activities that we want them to do. Their vocabulary is extended, their sense of being able to relate to somebody else is there. We're getting all those social skills working. And pretend. There's nothing better than pretending and imagination. And look here, I found little tiny wooden characters. They look like little people. So I thought, oh, okay, I can use those. And these kind of things, these tiny things, fit very nicely if a student is going to make a shadow box. Again, I dug around and I found an empty box, and I made a rough shadow box. And I thought what I would do is, if you can read it, it says The Train by Jody Callahan. A Mi'kmaq residential story. Characters are Ashley and Great Uncle. And I put on these 2 popsicle sticks here, two sentences that really resonated with me. And I don't know if you can see, I'm going to try and show you what I have in the bottom here. You see 2 little figures, you see some decrepit looking train tracks, you see some grass, you see some old bushes, you just see a little bit of what it might look like where the old train station was. So what I have here is there's Uncle sitting by the rock, or sitting by the foundation, and he's saying, I'm waiting for what was lost that day to come back to us. And I put Ashley's saying on there also. This meant a lot to me. When I read that last sentence, I just teared up. Don't worry, Uncle, I will wait with you. So there's that emotional tug that's there, and those are the kind of things when you remember things, is when you tie that emotion to something that just makes your heart go, woo! So just a quick example of a shadow box that took me 15 minutes. Okay, so you can make this an activity. You can run this over several days. You can make this go longer. I've done things like this with my classes in the past. I also am a big fan of teaching across the curriculum. For something like this, something like The Train, I incorporate things like, of course, the retell, whether it's written or whether it's done in art, and using all those artistic activities there. And you also can do science. Like I would say, what kind of animals live there? Well, when I did a quick search, I found out that there's salmon around there, and there's moose. So there's different animals that live in that habitat. You can also look at geography. because it's just geography, right? You can make your map, you can find out what's all around there. There's all sorts of things that you can incorporate. And if you felt like it, you can bring math into the equation. You can have your kids do a survey, like make something up. They can talk about, well, how many houses are there? How many stores, or how many moose do you think are there? There's some sort of small survey. I've also done something like this where I had the kids actually do shadow boxes, little towns, and they brought in the environment. They made a whole big booklet on how they could imagine this town to be. I wonder how they would imagine the village, the town, the reserve of Lustiguk. Those are the kind of things that you get kids thinking about. And you think about, geez, I wonder, what their dances are like. I wonder if their traditional regalia is like. I wonder, and you can really bring in a lot of the culture. There's the Mi'kmaq language. There's many, many, many things you could do with a picture book like The Train. There's a picture right at the end of the story that really made an impression on me also. And I really wanted to do this. I wanted to, because it shows very, very faintly in the story, and I call it the ghost train. In the back of that story, you'll see just a faint outline of a train. And when I picked up this big piece of foam, I thought that would be a really cool basis for making the ghost train. And one other thing, when your kids are saying this, when they're talking about it, when they're doing the retelling class, there's that mark you can get. It can become drama. It can become so much. All it takes is like a little bit of saying, yeah, my kids are really liking this. Yeah, I'm really enthused about this. Because that's what learning's all about. I'd like to share one other thing with you. I did not really do it today, but I want to show you something that I've taught in different schools too. I use my storytelling bag, and I carry a bag with me, and I have all kinds of little artifacts in it. And if I'm telling a legend, or if I'm telling just about a story, I'll put something in there, and I like to show what I have. So I have shown students things like, okay, let's make a storytelling bag to share this legend. Let's make a storytelling bag. So sometimes I might do something like I'll go get some rocks, some stones. I might get some shells. I might get something, but what I like about the rocks and the shells is it also becomes the art activity. You can paint them, paint some picture on there that might remind you of the story. For example, if I was talking about the story, The Train, and wanting to do a retell, and a student was making a storytelling bag and wanted to share it that way, well, I've given out paper bags, and some teachers I know that we've kind of made fabric bags and simply stitched them together. But for example, if this was even just a paper bag, this is not paper bag, this is a plastic bag, but we'd use a paper bag and the children would color it. They might do things like put the title on there, The Train, and maybe a picture on there. But inside their storytelling bag, they would have a stone. And maybe that stone might represent, represent Ashley. It could be Uncle, and they might be there just talking. Or maybe there's a piece that they've made into and drew a picture on there, painted a picture on there, and that was the train. And it talks about, and those are the things when you hold them and you're displaying them, the kids are reminded of the flow of the story. So those are just a few things that I wanted to share with you, how I would go about using the C2C2C teacher's resource. Use it. That's what I'm going to say, is just pick it up and use it. Celebrate Indigenous picture books and let your kids find the joy and share the joy with you, whether it's your school librarian, whether it's in your classrooms, whether it's in your library, wherever your librarians are, wherever teachers are. We're doing what we love. We love to share books. We want people to know how stories go. So, the one final thing I want to say is remember, and I tell my kids this, when you're telling a story, you don't go, once upon a time, there was a little girl you want your voice to ebb and flow and get excited and get sad and get soft and get loud. And you laugh and you stamp your feet and you're excited because you're sharing literature and you're sharing history. And that's one of the things about the train is you are sharing history. I'm so happy that I was able to be here with you and read, which is one of my favorite things to do. Telling stories is my favorite thing to do. And so now Adrienne Plumley will answer questions from all you educators. I want to say thank you very much, Chimigwech, for watching this, and many thanks, and a big Chimigwech to our event host, IBI Canada, International Board on Books for Young People, and Biblio Video. We'd also like to acknowledge the support of the Chalmers Family Fund administered by the Ontario Arts Council. So, Chimigwech again for sharing this time with us. Goodbye, Bamapi, and take care.
Thanks, Linda. Now we'll take some time to answer some of the questions that have come in. The first question is, how might you use these books to build community in your program? That's a great question. I think community and relationship building are so important. A big piece of community building is creating a space where your students feel safe and where students see themselves reflected in the learning environment, the programming, and the curriculum. And that includes using learning resources like picture books where the students see themselves reflected in the characters and the storylines. So many Indigenous protagonists in picture books are in challenging and or traumatic situations. Can you suggest titles in the collection that are about everyday life as an Indigenous child? Yes, definitely. Many picture books that feature Indigenous protagonists are centered on stories of different challenges and sometimes trauma. This collection features picture books that touch on residential schools and the intergenerational trauma that they've caused. But that shouldn't be the only story you tell. There are also several books in the collection that focus on Indigenous joy, brilliance, and survivance. It is crucial that every student learn about residential schools, which is why it's so important that those books are also part of this collection. The TRC calls to action 62 and 63 touch on that learning for students. Those two calls to action also talk about contemporary contributions of Indigenous peoples, and many of the books in this collection do that as well. Books like Neeby's Water Song, that touches on water, science, and advocacy. Eagle Mother, that also touches on science with connections to the land, food sovereignty, and culture. When We Are Kind, which has connections to kindness, relationships, and community. Oasis and the World Famous Bannock, which connects to food, community, and math. It's a book that I use very often with kindergarten students to explore unplugged coding, mapping, baking, cooking with family. The Origin of Day and Night, which has connections to land-based teachings, science, and math through looking at daily cycles. These are just a few of the books in the collection. There are many others that talk about Indigenous joy, survivance, language resurgence, and brilliance. The guide talks about creating a caring environment to support learners in discussing difficult topics. Do you have any suggestions on how to do that? Yeah, absolutely. I think this question connects back to the first question. When you're building an environment that is culturally safe, that's going to start with knowing your students, getting to know their families and caregivers, and building that trust with all of them so that they feel comfortable coming to you when they need extra support. It's also about knowing what supports you have access to in your classroom, your school board, and your community. For example, every public school board in Ontario has an Indigenous education lead. It might also mean finding out how to access support from a child and youth counselor or a social worker in your board or community. I think there may be children in my class whose families have experienced the residential school system. Is it appropriate to read books about residential schools with the class? Yes, it's definitely appropriate, but you need to make sure that you have systems in place to support that child and their family, as well as all the other children in the class. It's really hard to gauge who will or won't be triggered by the stories you share, and so you want to make sure that you have taken the necessary steps to ensure their safety and that you have all of those support systems in place. I love to share dual language books in the classroom, but I worry that I'm mispronouncing words. Can you suggest online or other resources that I can easily access? Yes, there are many language resources available online, and this is a question I get a lot in my role. There are also some really fantastic talking dictionaries available online, and I'm also starting to see many of the books include pronunciation guides embedded into the book. And sometimes you'll even find videos on YouTube or through the publisher where the author or the language speaker who's contributed to the book shares the pronunciation of the words that people may find difficult to pronounce or that they're concerned that they're not pronouncing correctly. One of the books in the collection, actually, it's a Mitig, uses English words to help teach the Ojibwe words by rhyming. It also includes a glossary, a pronunciation guide, and online recordings for educators and family and caregivers to use in learning how to pronounce the words properly. The books in the collection are wonderful, but I wish there was a book about the Indigenous peoples who live in our community. How can I bring stories into the classroom? I think that it's important to include stories written by members of the local Indigenous community. That might mean doing some research to find those books. For the most part, Indigenous authors will identify which nation or community they're from in their bios. You may want to connect with your local Indigenous community or friendship center. They may know of local authors. I personally buy a lot of my books from Good Minds, and as part of their search feature, you can filter results by language and nation. It's also really important to recognize that particularly in urban centers, you will find Indigenous peoples from a variety of nations and communities in one location. And so you want to make sure that you're providing a variety of stories from different nations and in different languages. As a non-Indigenous teacher, I want to respectfully use books about cultural teachings in the classroom, but I'm not very knowledgeable. Can you suggest resources I can access to help me prepare? I think first and foremost, when you're reading a book that includes cultural teachings, it's important to recognize that you're not the one giving the teachings. The author who wrote the book is the one sharing the teachings through you. You're the person conveying the message, kind of like a middle person. That's why it's so important to choose authentic resources, and that means resources created by Indigenous peoples and communities. You might also want to look into the protocols for engaging with the local Indigenous community and community members. Reaching out to the Indigenous education lead or department at your school is an option, as well as contacting the local Indigenous Friendship Center. You always want to approach in a good way, and that includes finding out what protocols of engagement you should follow when contacting a knowledge keeper, senator, traditional teacher, elder, or community member. Thank you for all the really thoughtful questions. I've really enjoyed being able to go through them and answer some of them for you tonight. Thank you.